Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
All right, we are here at the Department of Safety with a group of Keeniacs heading into the hearing office where we will be talking to bureaucrats about, residency and obligations to follow the ordinances and statutes and such. So, it's supposed to start at 1 o'clock. Their clock is way off. It says it is 12:35, but it's actually more like 12:50. So here we go.
There's no rule that prevents you from audio recording or video recording the hearing, but the official recording will be what I am doing with this device here. My name is Michael King. I'll be the hearings examiner today. Today is July 26, 2013. The hearing is taking place at the Department of Safety in Concord. The hearing has been scheduled at the request of the Keene Police Department and the prosecutor to have you appear and show cause why your driver license and or operating privileges should not be revoked or denied. And it's to review the receipt of the information that was submitted by the Keene Police Department that you could be hazardous to public safety. A person who shall be subject to such an order shall include but not be limited to one whom was driving to endanger the public. A law enforcement officer has reported you for misconduct. 3 or 4 don't apply. The statutory authority for the hearings are RSA 263-56, 263-59, Administrative Rules, SAFC 20403 and 20413. As I said, I am audio recording. The audio recording from the recording I'm making is available to either party for a period of 75 days. You can get it by sending us a written request, $25, and a recordable CD.
Mr. King, point of information, I had a counsel who should have been here via WebEx from his office in Arizona. That's something that has been...
I never had a written request from that person to send him an invitation.
Did actually get an invitation. He sent a request to safety-hearings@bos.nh.gov.
Okay.
They responded with...
No one made it a part of my file, so...
I did see the email come through with the link to the WebEx that he should be... Presumably he should be on it right now.
All right, well, since there was nothing in my file that indicated that he had ever sent an email address,
Would you like me to pull up the email? Because
no, I'm not doubting you. I just was not on notice because it wasn't in the file. All right, it's going to take me a couple of minutes to deal with this.
Sure.
I wasn't anticipating it because, like I said, there was nothing in my file. Nothing in writing from this representative that I have that indicated that he was appearing by video. I had your statement that he was going to, but I didn't see any written statement from him.
The paperwork came at the end of last week, and we weren't able to get anything until Monday, and everything was sent via email. So there would have been no...
If someone had put it with the paperwork, but for the time being, I'm going to turn off the recording.
Hey, ladies. I'm working on getting Mark Stevens connected. So anyway, Gene, if all y'all were doing would be to go after criminals who've actually created a victim, then I'd have no issue with it. In fact, I'd be a big supporter. But unfortunately, I saw over the last few weeks several people being arrested for driving, driving while license suspended, no victim there, and of course, possession of alcohol, no victim there, that sort of thing. So. Well, it's certainly a fact that when you put somebody in a jail cell or threaten them with jail, they haven't hurt anybody else. That's definitely aggression. That's not an opinion.
No, thanks.
You disagree?
I think so. Disagree.
What now?
You're welcome to your opinion.
Sure, of course I am. So you disagree that that's...
I'm not interested in it. I'm
even though government's supposed to be open and accountable. Why is it that Ken Viola ignores me?
You have to ask him.
I can't. He won't even look at me.
I can't speak.
I mean, most of you guys are friendly. Most of you guys are willing to have a conversation, make eye contact, but he won't. He's, like if he walks by me, I'll say, "Hey, Ken," and he'll just keep on walking. It's not like it's been once or twice either. It's been a bunch of times. Isn't that weird?
Can't answer that.
New Hampshire Constitution Article 8 does provide that government employees are supposed to be open and accountable. And it doesn't seem like he's being very open or accountable. I know you can't have an opinion about that one, I realize. But how strange. Hopefully somebody who's more friendly will become a police chief.
So are you just doing this because the camera's still on, or are you just trying to engage in a conversation? Because you know I can't answer it when you keep talking
I'm just killing time, that's all.
All right.
I was talking to you before I turned the camera on.
I know that. But I've had conversations before that usually don't run with the normal.
We can talk later. We can talk later. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
But you know I can't answer certain things.
It's fine. It's fine.
Check the audio again, sir.
Yeah, test. This is Mark Stevens. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we are back on the record. So I read the hearing notice, the statutory authority. Now I'm going to determine who is present here today, and I'll start with the state since the state brought this petition.
Thank you. Jean Killam for the Police Department and the Assistant County Attorney in Cheshire County.
And spell the last name, please.
Kilha.
I'm sorry. I can't hear her.
I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, sir. I only have so much technical.
Is the microphone on this thing?
Yeah.
Maybe move that a little closer.
Well, it's going to have to be moved every time somebody speaks, and I don't know how we're going to manage that.
Even if we can just move it like maybe to here.
Let's see how far it'll go.
You want to turn it toward him now?
I don't care if you can see me. Just maybe you could speak up to me.
Okay, why don't we try it again and see if he can hear you this time?
Yes, Jean Killam for the state.
Actually, I had an initial objection. I have an objection to Miss Killam appearing today.
Basis of the objection?
Yeah, the objection I have is that I believe she's bringing a complaint knowingly absent evidence of jurisdiction. We've had prior experience with Miss Killam. I've spoken with her on the phone. Mr. Freeman has had a formal disclosure that was sent to Miss Killam. She wound up this was with a criminal charge that was filed previously with the court. She wound up withdrawing that. I've subsequently followed up with her, not gotten any evidence from her proving that the Constitution laws of the state of New Hampshire actually apply to Mr. Freeman. And so I believe her appearance today is disingenuous at best, that she's knowingly proceeding absent evidence of jurisdiction. I also have an objection as to whether she's appearing on behalf of the state, but I'd like to address the issue that she's proceeding absent evidence of jurisdiction first.
Can we have her sit maybe one seat closer to
Okay,
this?
why don't you move over?
I thought Sergeant Short would sit here.
Well, why don't you move over until we get
Okay.
through this? I guess I'm going to address you first. This is a duly convened hearing of the Department of Safety based on a complaint brought by the Keene Police Department. And I recognize her as a member of the Bar of the State of New Hampshire. I'm not sure what your authority is, sir, but she's a member of the Bar of the State of New Hampshire. As far as I'm concerned, she can appear here, and I don't know as though you've said anything that makes me think otherwise.
Well, I believe she's filed a complaint with the DMV knowing that there was no evidence of jurisdiction, that there was no evidence to prove that the Constitution laws of the state of New Hampshire actually apply to Mr. Freeman, and that she has purposely withdrawn her complaint in the court to bring it here to enjoy a lesser standard of proof, which even with the lower standard of proof, because she has no evidence to prove that the Constitution laws apply and can't establish jurisdiction over Mr. Freeman, that we shouldn't be permitted to have a hearing at all.
How do I know that she doesn't have any evidence if I haven't heard anything yet? And also, why do I need a constitutional authority to hold this hearing when this is a statutorily and administrative rule appropriate hearing?
Because it goes to the issue of jurisdiction over Mr. Freeman, that Ms. Killam is under the impression or is arguing that the constitutional laws apply to Mr. Freeman, thereby giving her and the police department jurisdiction and also giving your agency jurisdiction to have a hearing and make a decision affecting Mr. Freeman's life. So it's an issue of fact, not a constitutional issue or an issue of law. If Ms. Killam has evidence to prove the constitutional laws apply to Mr. Freeman, then she needs to present it right now.
I'm going to go
This
right.
is the only way she can establish jurisdiction.
I'm denying your motion, sir, and I'm going to go right to the evidence today.
Well, on what grounds? Do you believe that she has evidence to prove the constitutional laws apply to Mr. Freeman and there's jurisdiction?
By statute and rule, this is appropriately convened hearing, and we're going forward.
Well, objection. Are you saying that there is evidence to prove that the constitutional laws apply to Mr. Freeman that you've gotten from Ms. Killam?
I'm not entirely sure what constitution you're referring to start with, sir.
I believe it's the New Hampshire Constitution that's being applied to Mr. Freeman.
Okay.
So again, my question is, has Ms. Killam provided you evidence to prove that the constitutional laws of the state of New Hampshire apply to Mr. Freeman that would then enable you to have jurisdiction over him today?
Well, she hasn't put on her case yet, so, and I'm not even sure that I need proof of constitutional authority. I mean, I believe I have it, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a duly convened hearing of the Department of Safety. I'm the Commissioner's designee. We have statutory and rule authority to go forward here today, and we are going forward.
I think what he's asking.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just to rephrase my understanding of what he's saying is that, you're saying you have the statutory authority to move forward, but I think the objection is whether or not the statutes actually apply to me.
And how can I do that until I hear evidence?
Well, because Ms. Killam she had filed the complaint. She is required to establish jurisdiction before any hearing is put on. So the question goes, again, what evidence has Ms. Killam provided you so far to prove that the constitutional laws actually apply to Mr. Freeman and that there's jurisdiction to proceed against him?
I think that will play itself out during the course of the hearing.
Objection. I believe if you believe you have jurisdiction to actually conduct a hearing, I want to know what evidence you're basing that on that you got from Ms. Killam. Do you believe that you have jurisdiction to conduct a hearing?
All right, I guess I should go back to the hearing notice and the statutory authority for the hearing because we did not have you on the record at the time. Mr. Freeman has been ordered to appear and show cause why his driver license or operating privileges should not be revoked or denied. To review receipt of information submitted from Keene Police Department that you could be hazardous to public safety. The person who shall be subject to such an order shall include but not be limited to one whom, and I will narrow it down, number 2, a law enforcement officer has reported for misconduct. That is appropriate based on RSA 263-56, 263-59, Administrative Rule SAFC 20403, Administrative Rule SAFC 20413. That's my authority.
Okay, now the question is, has Ms. Killam provided you with any evidence to prove that the Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire actually apply to Ian to prove that you have jurisdiction or to establish your jurisdiction?
No.
What has she given you evidence-wise to prove that the codes apply to Ian?
I have statutory and administrative rule authority to conduct this hearing, and as far as I'm concerned, that is all I need. Would you like me to go?
Objection. What evidence? Let me finish. I'm objecting
No,
because you're
I'm
giving
running
me
this
a
hearing,
circular.
sir. I'm
Let me
running this
finish,
hearing,
sir.
Okay? And I also have the authority to disconnect you whenever I want if I think you are being disruptive to getting this hearing done. Do you understand that?
I understand I'm not being disruptive, though. You haven't answered the
Well,
question.
so far
What
you're not
evidence
allowing me
has
to
Ms.
conduct the
Killam given
hearing.
you?
You're not allowing me to conduct the hearing that I am, by statute, allowed to conduct by the Commissioner of Safety. That's how you're being disruptive.
I think he's just asking
No,
for
I have
evidence.
I'm asking for
statutory
evidence.
I have statutory and rule authority to conduct this hearing. I am going forward on that basis.
The question, I think, is what is the evidence that those statutes apply to me? I'm not here.
I don't need evidence, I just need statutes.
No, I'm asking for the evidence that the statutes apply. So you're obligated to follow the statutes because you've sworn an oath to do that, but I don't see any evidence that I've done that.
That will be part of the hearing in chief. That I will be making determinations based on New Hampshire constitutional law, statutory law, administrative rules, and I am convening this hearing. We're going forward over your objection, sir. Okay? And over your objection.
I have a point of clarification, sir. Are you acting under the auspice or the opinion that Ms. Killam has presented you evidence proving the Constitution laws apply to Ian and that you have jurisdiction? I just want to be clear about that.
She has given us a prima facie case that Mr. Freeman has been guilty of misconduct in operating a motor vehicle in the state of New Hampshire. Now it's up to the state to give me sufficient evidence today to support their prima facie allegation that caused this hearing to be scheduled.
Well, I still would like you to be very clear that you're assuming jurisdiction without any evidence so far that you had from Ms. Killam. You're just assuming that the Constitution laws apply to Ian and that you have jurisdiction. Do I have your position correct?
There is a statute that says that a local police department can report a driver for misconduct. We received that report by statute. We then convene a hearing to determine if there is any evidence to support the report. That's the basis I'm going forward.
Okay, but my objection is to the assertion of jurisdiction, and you keep going back to the statute, and it sounds like you're making a logical fallacy, a circular argument. Basically, it's very similar to what prosecutors and people, like Ms. Killam do. If I'm getting this right, you're saying that when I ask for evidence that the Constitution laws apply, you keep going back to the statute itself. So are you saying that you have statutory authority to conduct the hearing or statutory jurisdiction over Ian because the statute says so?
Yeah. That's what I've been doing for 15 years, and I'll continue to do it today.
Well, with all due respect, sir, your time on the job is not relevant to whether Ms. Killam has provided you with empirical proof that the Constitution laws apply to Ian and that there's jurisdiction.
As an administrative hearings examiner, it is not my job to make constitutional determinations. It is my job to apply statutes and administrative rules, and that's what I'm going to do today. And we are moving on at this point. Over your objection.
Well, no objection. Well, sir, you're mischaracterizing.
And if you keep disrupting this hearing and preventing me from conducting this hearing, I am going to disconnect you.
Well, you don't have to threaten me because I just want to point out on the record, since we're going to have a record for appeal, you're mixing an issue.
Sir. You don't have to be repetitive.
But you see. No, I need to point out that you're misconstruing an issue of fact with an issue of law, and you're not making a proper determination. I'm not asking you for a legal issue or a legal determination. I'm asking you for evidence. It's an issue of fact, so please don't confuse the two or conflate the two any longer. I'm asking what evidence you rely on to show that Ms. Killam has given you to prove the Constitution laws that you rely on actually apply to Ian.
We will determine that by evidence today, sir. The hearing is legally convened, and I am to hear evidence. That is my ruling. We are moving on.
Oh, I still have an objection. She's saying she represents the state today?
This is your last warning, sir. You are disrupting this hearing. I am going to disconnect you if you do not allow me to conduct the hearing in the way that I see fit. Do you understand?
I do, but I have a legitimate objection.
I'm going to count to 5, and if you say another word, I'm going to disconnect you. I have that authority under the administrative rules. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. State may present its evidence at this time.
The state calls Jason Short.
Will I be able to ask him questions?
You either have a legal representative or you're representing yourself. What's your decision, sir?
Are you going to allow me to speak then? Because you just did a countdown to 5 that I'd be disconnected if I spoke again. Because I do have an objection to the appearance of the police officer. I don't believe that Ms. Killam has any evidence that he has any personal first-hand knowledge that the Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire apply to Ian.
He doesn't need that knowledge, sir.
He doesn't need he's allowed to speculate in this hearing?
He is going to testify about his knowledge of facts as they apply to his knowledge of law in the state of New Hampshire.
But one of the issues he has to prove, one of the elements, is that he has to prove that the Constitution and laws of the state actually apply to Ian. And if he doesn't have personal first-hand knowledge... Well, let me finish.
That's your opinion, and I have not accepted that opinion at this point, so now the question
what I'm
to you,
asking
Mr.
is,
Freeman,
does Ms. Killam have...
Mr. Freeman, either he is representing you and he will ask the questions, or you are representing yourself. You need to tell me right now.
If Mark would like to continue, I'm happy to have Mark continue at this point.
Okay, and that means that he asks the questions and you do not. He can put you on to testify at some point if that's what you desire. But I am not going to have him ask questions and you ask questions and him ask questions. It's not the way we're conducting this hearing today.
As long as he's allowed to ask questions, I won't ask questions.
He's going to be allowed to ask questions as long as he's not disrupting the flow of the hearing. If I determine he is, he will not be allowed to talk anything. And then you can take over. All right? Okay. Officer, raise your right hand, please.
What objection? My objection has been heard and determined. Does Ms. Killam have any evidence to show that the witness has personal knowledge?
I think I have moved on your objection, sir, and we are going forward with evidence. And if you...
So let me, just a point of clarification. You're going to allow the witness to testify.
If you're going to keep beating this dead horse, then you will be disconnected.
I just need to understand your decision. You're allowing the witness to testify without any showing his personal knowledge of the matters.
Who doesn't have personal knowledge of the matter? The officer, I believe, does, and I don't know that until he testifies, do I?
Not necessarily. We've had enough experience with Ms. Killam that she would be able to determine, should be able to determine before she puts a witness on the stand that he does have personal... You need to let me finish.
Do you understand that? I have no experience with
But Ms. Killam has. Ms. Killam has filed a complaint and is basing everything on this witness's testimony, and she is responsible as the prosecutor to be able to confirm that the witness does have personal first-hand knowledge of the evidence before she puts him on the stand and calls him as a witness.
I need to make that determination, sir. She's prosecuting the case. I need to make the determination whether I think his testimony is reliable, and that's what the rules say. Okay.
No, Rule 602 says that no witness may testify to a matter unless there's evidence showing that they have personal knowledge, and that's all I'm asking is for Ms. Killam to be able to confirm that the witness has...
What rule did you just refer to?
Rule 602.
What rule is that? I don't have a Rule 602.
Rule 602 is in the Rules of Evidence that give some of the qualifications for a witness.
Federal Rules of Evidence, sir?
I believe that it's the New Hampshire has the equivalent to the federal rule.
This is an administrative proceeding. We have administrative rules. That's what governs this hearing.
Okay, so let me just understand correctly that a witness may testify without a showing from the prosecutor that they have personal first-hand knowledge.
He is a witness who has information that is relevant to this proceeding. I can accept hearsay. I can accept... He could testify to hearsay, and I can accept that based on our rules. And he is...
So you're going to... Okay.
And he's going to proceed to testify.
I did an administrative... Yeah, okay, I just do a point of clarification because I just did this with the NHES a few days ago. I want a clarification on when you say hearsay. Are you going to accept hearsay from the police officer from an unidentified source?
I can. I don't have to.
You can accept a statement from the police officer that he's giving secondhand from an unidentified source.
Administrative hearings shall not be bound by common law or the rules of evidence. All relevant evidence shall be admissible. The examiner may...
Okay, so
Examiner may
you would consider it credible?
irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly cumulative or repetitious evidence. That is SAFC 203.19. That applies to this hearing.
Okay, so just to be clear, you would consider credible a statement from the witness secondhand from an unidentified source.
Sir, he can testify to it. Whether I determine it's credible or not is a determination I make in the overall decision on the case.
Okay, so it is something you would possibly accept. I'm just trying to see what kind of standard of proof that you hold, sir.
We have a preponderance of the evidence standard, sir. And hearsay is admissible, but I have to determine its reliability and the weight that I give it in the overall determination. Any further questions?
Well, I still object to the... Yeah, well, I still object to the witness being put on a stand because I don't believe he has any relevant testimony to give.
And I don't know
and
that
with
until
personal
he gives
knowledge
the
that the...
testimony. Objection overruled. Officer, oath. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name and your occupation.
My name is Jason Short. I'm a police sergeant for the city of Keene, New Hampshire.
And you may inquire, Attorney Killen.
Thank you. Are you a certified law enforcement officer in New Hampshire?
I am.
How long have you been in the city of Keene?
14 years.
Drawing your attention to February 7th of 2013 at about 11:40 a.m. Were you on duty for the People's Department?
I was.
And were you in full uniform and operating a patrol cruiser as of that time?
Yes.
And
excuse me, I'm sorry. I can hear the police officer. I can hear the witness fine. She's completely
Let's see if
garbled.
that will go over under that table.
I don't even know if my camera can hear it.
I can't, I'm having trouble hearing her as well.
That's not my problem. But you want to see if the camera...
Again, the police officer is coming through loud and clear. It's Ms. Killam that is completely
It
garbled.
doesn't look like it will. You think so?
Maybe you could just scooch the table over a little.
We don't have much table here. Maybe she could sit in this chair and you could... Oh, you're... Okay.
See if it'll go in that corner. All right, please continue.
thank you. And about that time, again, February 7th of this year, 2013, at about 11:40 a.m., where were you? And what, if any, vehicle caught your attention?
I was on George Street heading, I guess what would be westbound, coming up to Washington Street, when I observed a car, black and white. I guess the way the sun hit it, I could see fully that it said police on it. Didn't really take my attention too much, other than I didn't recognize it as a local police department's car. I came to the end of the street, I turned right, or I looked right, and I saw that the plate in the back was a bright yellow fluorescent plate. I lived all over the country. The only other plate that I could think of that would be Arizona, which threw me off guard because it said police on the side of it. So I caught up to it. I couldn't read the plate. I was able to pull alongside the vehicle close enough for me to be able to read it, just because of the way the sun was hitting it. And I saw that it said the Shire on it, or something along that line. I didn't recognize the car. It belonged to Mr. Freeman here, who I know is Ian Bernard or Ian Freeman. I recognized the car. I know that it has Wisconsin registered plates, but that plate was not on the back. It had this novelty plate, so to speak, as far as I was concerned. So I stopped the vehicle to inquire where the actual registration was.
And where did you actually conduct it?
I'm going to object to the question. I don't see where any relevance to proving that the Constitution laws of the state of New Hampshire actually apply to Ian.
Overruled. You may continue.
Excuse me, just point of clarification. On what grounds do you see that the question is relevant to proving that the Constitution laws apply to Ian?
That will be developed during the course of the testimony and the any issues of law that you would like to raise, but right now I'm hearing evidence and I will determine whether it's relevant.
Okay, so just so I understand, you're not seeing any relevance at this point. You think that Ms. Killam will develop that during the course of the direct examination?
The testimony that they present will be weighed against the laws of the state of New Hampshire. You and I may have a disagreement as to whether the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire and the laws of the state of New Hampshire apply to Mr. Bernard, Mr. Freeman, whichever we call him, but that's going to ultimately be up to me.
Well, I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. You also don't believe at this point that there's relevance.
I've made it clear where I'm coming from, sir. We will proceed with the evidence.
And where
So you believe that? I just need to understand, because from what you've said, it's a little confusing. I want to be able to understand you correctly. That you do agree that so far Ms. Killam has not shown relevance to proving the Constitution and Code apply to Ian.
I don't think
that she'll develop that
I really
later.
don't think that's required of her. You will be able to make arguments of law after the evidence is in. Right now, I'm hearing the evidence that they desire to present here today, and then I will hear arguments of law. But at this point,
I'm not arguing law. I'm talking about if the testimony of the officer is relevant to establishing that the Constitution and laws actually apply. Now, you've already said you're going to overrule the objection on the grounds that she'll lay that out later. So I just want to know. So it seems like you're in agreement that at this point she has not laid a proper foundation to show relevance of these questions.
all right. Would you like me to quote the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire to you, sir? I don't know if you've read it in preparation of the hearing today. But Article 5...
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking that at all, sir.
The legislature the power to enact laws. Article 6A is where the Constitution says that the legislature may make laws relating to the use of public highways in the state. That's the Constitution I'm going by here today, sir.
Well, I would object. That's not what I'm asking. And since you're raising that issue, let me ask you, because I didn't get a chance to do this before you threatened me. Are you under the impression or the opinion that the Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire apply to Ian?
I'm saying that the Constitution applies to the use of highways in the state of New Hampshire, and if Ian is shown here today to have misused or abused that privilege, then the state will have given me relevant evidence.
But the question I'm asking is, at this point in time, do you believe the Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire apply to Ian right now?
Well, since I haven't heard all the evidence, I can't give you a final determination on that.
Okay, well, that's what I'm looking for. So just for the record, you are not under the assumption or the perception that the Constitution...
Sir, I'm under the assumption, but I want to hear all the evidence before my assumption is either proved founded or unfounded. Because he is an inhabitant of the state of New Hampshire, I am under the assumption that the laws of the state of New Hampshire apply to him. You can prove to me otherwise, but right now, I am going forward on the basis that since he inhabits the state of New Hampshire laws apply to him. And we'll see how...
Well, I would object on that. I would object on that because that's an element that Ms. Killam is supposed to prove. She's supposed to prove that the Constitution laws apply to Ian to make her case. That's the entire foundation of her case. This is why I was so adamant about that before we started, before you got upset and decided to threaten to cut my transmission. If you are already under the impression or the assumption that the Constitution laws apply to Ian, you've already picked up Ms. Killam's burden of proof. How can Ian get a fair hearing here if you've already determined the foundation of Ms. Killam's case? That's why she sat there stone-faced the entire time I was asking about evidence that the Constitution and laws of the state apply to Ian. She doesn't have anything to offer. You're doing it for her right now. And I would object that we can't get a fair hearing from you, sir, by your own admission, because you've already determined a major element of Ms. Killam's case.
I presume anyone who inhabits the state of New Hampshire is subject to New Hampshire law, and if you can prove to me otherwise, that's where we'll go.
Can you define the state?
What evidence do you rely on? What evidence do you rely on from Ms. Killam to prove that the Constitution laws actually apply to Ian?
I haven't relied on any evidence of hers yet. As an administrative hearings examiner, I am presumed to have knowledge, specialized knowledge of the area within which I hold hearings. And that knowledge tells me that anyone who drives a motor vehicle in the state of New Hampshire is subject to the motor vehicle laws of the state of New Hampshire.
Well, that's your opinion. Now, what evidence do you base it on that the Constitution laws actually apply to Ian?
It is an opinion that if you have evidence to rebut, I will certainly listen to it today. But I am a hearings examiner who is allowed special.
Sir, the one who makes the allegation bears the burden of proof. Okay, if you're going to assert that
he has misused or abused driving privileges in the state of New Hampshire, that's their burden of proof. And it's your
no, the burden of proof is
that
to show that it applies in the first place. The burden of proof is to show that the Constitution laws actually apply to him, unless you want to go on record that it's being applied arbitrarily. If there is not concrete empirical proof that the Constitution laws apply.
From the beginning, sir. Does the U.S. Constitution apply to Ian?
I don't see any evidence to that, sir. And if you believe so, then you better put up the empirical proof, and you better have a witness with personal first-hand knowledge, or you're purely speculating.
Okay,
we're not going to tolerate it.
This discussion isn't going to go anywhere, because if you believe that the U.S. Constitution doesn't apply to Ian, then of course you don't believe that the New Hampshire Constitution applies to Ian. But I have an obligation to hold this hearing, hear evidence as to whether he has misused and abused driving privileges in the state of New Hampshire. And that's what the state is attempting
I would
to
object
prove
to
at
your
this point.
characterization.
I'm sorry?
The position we need to make clear is that there's no evidence to prove that the Constitutions apply to Ian. If you believe otherwise, then you need to put up the evidence.
I am here to uphold the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire, sir. So if I assume that it doesn't apply to Ian, or I make every person who comes in here prove that, I'm not upholding my responsibility that I took on when I took this job to uphold the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire. And that
You didn't take an oath to arbitrarily apply it to Ian Freeman, did you?
arbitrary?
Did you take an oath to arbitrarily apply the Constitution to Ian Freeman?
I took an oath to apply the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire to everyone who appears in front of me.
I don't believe that that's what the oath you took. If you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, it does not mean that you were to arbitrarily apply it to everybody within your sights. We are here at an administrative hearing where there's a burden of proof, and you and Ms. Killam are making allegations and opinions against Mr. Freeman as if they are true. We're asking for the evidence that that is based on. And prior, you accused me of disrupting the proceedings, and you threatened to cut my transmission only because I was asking for evidence that Ms. Killam is supposed to provide you in the first place. Now, is the opinion that the Constitutional laws apply to Ian arbitrary or not?
No, it's not at all arbitrary. It applies to everyone that appears
Then
in
it
front
must.
of me.
Then it must be based on witnesses and evidence, and that is Ms. Killam's burden. She believes the Constitution and Code apply to Mr. Freeman. She has the burden of proving with empirical proof
And that is your opinion,
that it does.
sir, and I am overruling
No,
your
it is not.
opinion, and I am going to continue
No.
with testimony over your objection.
Well, my objection is that it's not my opinion. You said it wasn't arbitrary. So by your admission, it's based on evidence and witnesses. We want to know what those witnesses are and what the evidence is. Unless you want to change your mind and tell the truth, that it is an arbitrary decision that you're making and that Ms. Killam has made that.
I am not a court of constitutional authority, sir. I am only here
I
to
understand
uphold
that, but
statutes and administrative rules of the state of New Hampshire. I don't have the right to make constitutional determinations. I absolutely don't.
I'm not asking you to.
Judges can do that. That can happen on appeal. I can't do it.
I'm not asking you to. Again, you're mischaracterizing what we have, which is an issue of fact. You keep mischaracterizing it as an issue of law. I'm not asking about the constitutionality of anything. What I'm discussing is what evidence do you have when Ms. Killam
I don't know how I can interpret it any other
have
way when you ask me if the Constitution
It's
applies
not-
to him, that you're asking me to make a constitutional determination.
I'm asking for evidence that it applies to Mr. Freeman. It's an issue of fact, not an issue of law.
And
You keep conflating the two,
I'm trying to get facts on the table here so that I can make a determination.
But you've already made the determination. You've already stated on the record you believe the Constitution and laws apply to Ian, and you've heard no testimony, and you've got nothing from Ms. Killam to back that up. You insist it's not arbitrary, but when I ask you for the facts, then you go back and say you're not a constitutional authority. You just don't answer the question. What really needs to happen is
I have answered,
you need
sir,
to back
is that if Ian Freeman has used the roads of the state of New Hampshire, he is within my jurisdiction to hold this hearing. That's my ruling, and that's what I'm going with.
And I object because you've got no evidence to support that. You've got no evidence to prove the Constitution and Code apply to Ian just because his physical location may have been in Keene.
And once again,
or
sir, I am going to
Hampshire.
caution you that if you don't allow me to conduct this hearing and gather evidence, I am going to disconnect you, okay? I have ruled on your
Well, I understand.
I have ruled on your objection. You keep repeating yourself, and I'm not going to have this. I'm not going to go back and forth with you on this. I have told you why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue to do it. And if you have an appropriate objection, if you have an appropriate objection to it at some point, then I will listen to it. But I'm not going to listen to you rehash the same thing every time.
Well, if you gave me a straight answer, sir, I wouldn't have to keep asking the
I think I have given you a straight answer, and I'm not giving you any further answers. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I have an objection that we would object that you have already demonstrated extreme bias against Mr. Freeman, that a fair hearing with you is not possible because you've already picked up Ms. Killam's burden of proving that the Constitution and laws actually apply to Mr. Freeman.
I'm overruling your objection. I'm going forward with the hearing. I will hear the evidence. I will make a determination.
Do we have a supervisor that you can bring this, we can take a short recess and we can put the motion before a supervisor?
I'm my supervisor, sir. I am the chief hearings examiner.
You're the chief?
Yes.
So a motion to change the hearing officer there's no one above you, there's no other judge or administrative law officer that we can bring this to make a decision? Because I want you to, what I would like to do is I would like you to tell them, I am assuming that the Constitution and laws apply to Ian Freeman on behalf of Ms. Killam, and they're objecting to that. You're taking her burden of proof away from her and making it, much, much easier for her to establish her position. So I don't think it's right that we should have the decision made just by you.
Your request to have me recuse myself is denied, sir.
On what grounds?
I have not made up my mind on the case, but you are focusing on a particular aspect of the case that as I said, I do not have the authority to rule on constitutional issues. I have told you that if he used the roads of the state of New Hampshire, it gives me jurisdiction to hear the case, and I will hear the facts of his operation and why the city of Keene believes that operation is illegal or improper. That's my...
No, sir, you say, and I agree with you that you can take the facts. All I'm doing is asking you to provide me those facts. I'm not asking you for a constitutional determination. I'm asking you for the evidence that Ms. Killam is supposed to provide that the Constitution actually applies to Ian. It's an issue of fact.
You're making an assumption that I don't agree with.
What's that?
That she has to make a showing that the Constitution applies to Ian. I've told you the basis I'm conducting this hearing. He has used the roads of the state of New Hampshire. The city of Keene believes he may be doing that in an improper and illegal manner, and I need to hear the evidence to make a determination on that issue. Whether you believe the Constitution of New Hampshire applies to him or not is not anything I'm actually that worried about at this point. You can make legal arguments, and I am going to hear the facts of the case. Because he has used the roads of the state of New Hampshire, that gives me jurisdiction over that operation.
You're not concerned with the entire basis of her jurisdiction and her complaint that the Constitution laws apply. And I've asked you already what evidence you rely on to prove that the Constitution and laws apply to Ian just because he's physically in New Hampshire, and you don't have an answer for that. You just say, I'm not a constitutional scholar or something like that. You don't have any evidence to prove that.
I'm not a constitutional court.
Okay, I apologize. I got that wrong. But you keep doing that instead of just asking what evidence. If you believe the Constitution laws apply to Ian just because he's physically in New Hampshire, I want the evidence you rely on to prove that.
I am going forward, and I'm not going to repeat this anymore. I am going forward on whether the city of Keene meets its burden that he has misused and abused driving privileges in the state of New Hampshire, and that was as a result of operating on roads in the state of New Hampshire. The rest of it, to me, doesn't matter. Okay?
Okay, so as an objection, because I believe due process requires a notice and opportunity to be heard, you're telling me point blank that whether there's evidence that the Constitution and laws apply in the first place is not something that you're going to entertain. You're just going to accept that as the gospel truth written in stone, and you're not going to allow us to challenge that.
I didn't say I wasn't going to allow you to challenge that. I simply said that I'm going forward and hearing evidence based on the fact that I need to understand whether he has used roads in the state of New Hampshire and whether that use has risen to the level of a misuse and abuse of his driving privileges. That's what this hearing is convened for. You will have every opportunity you want to make your arguments, but I need to hear this evidence to even get to that. Because it's the state's burden to go forward.
The point of clarification here, sir, with all due respect, if you're saying that the Constitution laws apply because they say so, because that's what I'm hearing from you, that the law says if you use the roads, the law applies. That's circular. That's not evidence.
No.
So are you really having?
Sir,
let me finish. Are you
my
saying that the
point
foundation
clear.
of your
I have made my
position?
point clear. I am going forward on this hearing because there is a statute that they believe has been violated. I have the right to hold the hearing. I don't have to make a determination as to whether the Constitution and laws of the state apply to this gentleman, and you are certainly capable, it sounds like, of making that argument yourself once I have heard the state's case. And I am going to hear the state's case.
You're making an assumption that picks up her burden of proof that he was physically in New Hampshire, the laws apply. So I'm just trying to get.
I'm waiting to hear that
for later
evidence,
if this
sir.
has to be
I'm
appealed.
waiting to hear that evidence, and you're not letting me.
Well, I made an objection that there was no relevance, and this is what got us started on this because you said, I wrote it down.
10 minutes ago.
But that was on the grounds that she was going to build a foundation later. You said that she was going to build her foundation later, and I wanted a clarification from you that at this point in time, she has not shown any relevance to the question.
And I've overruled that objection, and I'm going to continue to take testimony. Please continue.
Okay, but you still haven't been clear that you're in agreement that she hasn't laid a foundation of relevance at this point. And I think it's highly disingenuous
Sir, I have made my ruling,
to
and
make
you
a
are going
statement.
to continue to argue it. I am going to disconnect you. Do you understand that?
You don't need to disconnect. Don't do that.
You have created your record 5 times over. Okay. I want to hear evidence. Please continue.
That's what we want to hear, sir. But you've been disruptive yourself and not giving straight answers and threatening me. We were just here from the very beginning. All we've done is ask for evidence. That's all we've done. When she filed this nonsense in court, we just wanted the evidence. And so it's disingenuous for you to say, I just want to get to the evidence, when for the entire time we've been doing this.
Please continue. You can move that back over here.
Sergeant Short, you had indicated that you initiated a motor vehicle stop of that vehicle.
I did.
And to be clear, where did you initiate that motor vehicle stop?
It was on Route 9, just trying to remember my direction, just east of Washington Street on Route 9.
Will you take official notice that Route 9 is away from New Hampshire?
That is a fact known to me, and I am able to take official notice that Route 9 in Keene is away in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. And the vehicle pulled over?
Yes.
And what type of vehicle, just to be clear?
It's a Crown Vic, it appears likely an old auction police car from some department. I don't know where from exactly.
And is that a Ford?
It is.
And did you initiate contact with the driver of the vehicle?
Yes. As I approached, I recognized the driver to be Mr. Freeman, whom I do know by sight. And there was some occupants in the car who I also recognized as well.
Okay. And you had indicated earlier he also goes by the name of Ian Bernard, is that correct?
Correct.
And did he, at your first contact, did he provide you with any information, specifically a license and registration for the vehicle?
Yes, I asked Mr. Freeman for his license and the registration. I pointed out the fact that I stopped him because of the plate that was in the back. He handed me 2 registrations. One was the Wisconsin registration, which the plate was on the front of the vehicle, and one was for the Shire, which I know to be an association of his group or affiliates. And that plate was on the back. I asked him, I go, have you obtained your New Hampshire driver's license yet? As we had some correspondence back and forth about that he's lived here for 6 years and he needed to switch over from Florida to New Hampshire as he's lived here for so long. He stated that he had none, that he was not a resident, he was an inhabitant, and he handed me his Florida license, which is valid.
And what did that Florida driver's license indicate his name was? What's the name on the card? Do you recall?
I'm quite sure it says Ian Holt Bernard. Quite sure that's the name, but offhand now I don't remember.
And and you said you confirmed that when you did initiate the motor vehicle stop, that the plate in the back is not recognized by any state.
No, I believe that it was made by someone, it's more of a novelty plate, as far as any state that I'm aware would recognize.
And do you recognize Mr. Freeman, also known as Ian Bernard, in the room here today?
Yes, you see the right next to me.
Will the record reflect the witness identified as the respondent?
The record will reflect that Officer Short has identified Ian Freeman, also known as Ian Bernard, as the person he had contact with on February 7th, 2013.
Thank you. And did you ultimately issue Mr. Freeman Bernard with a summons for failing to obtain a New Hampshire license?
I did.
And did you also draft a report contemporaneous in time with your interaction with him on February 7th?
Yes.
The state would like to submit the report as State's Exhibit 1, and I did provide.
Okay, you've seen a copy of this?
Was this in the original packet, Gene?
Yeah.
Yes, then I guess I have seen that.
Okay, what this is, and you pre-marked it for me as number 1, is 2 pages of summons report, 1 page of looks like narrative report. Is it anywhere? Oh, at the top it says narrative for Sergeant Short. There we go, that's what I was looking for. And then cut and pasted sections 21.6 and 21.6A of the New Hampshire statutes. That is Exhibit 1.
And Sergeant Short, you had indicated that it was your understanding that at the time of the stop, he did not have a valid New Hampshire driver's license. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you did confirm that later by documentation from the Department of Motor Vehicles in New Hampshire?
I did.
And I'm handing you what has been pre-marked as State's Exhibits 2 and 3. If you could look at those documents and, for the record, indicate whether you recognize those and what they are.
This is reports from the Department of Safety Division of Motor Vehicles. One is to verify that Ian Bernard has not been issued a driver's license in the state of New Hampshire, and one is for Ian Freeman, the same date of birth. Also indicates that he was not given a New Hampshire driver's license.
And the state would like to submit these as full exhibits.
You have copies of these as well?
I do.
Yeah. Okay,
No objection.
Exhibits numbered 2 and 3. Exhibit 2 is the verification that Ian Bernard does not hold a license in New Hampshire. And Exhibit 3, Ian Freeman does not hold a license in the state of New Hampshire. And the date of birth are the same, 8/2/80.
And to clarify, when you took Mr. Freeman / Mr. Bernard's license from him at the motor vehicle stop, did you confirm his date of birth? And it matched what the documents you just looked at?
Yes.
And again, it's your understanding that he does have a valid driver's license in the state of Florida, correct?
Yes, he does.
And did you view a certified copy of his Florida driving record?
I did.
Whether you would have been pre-marked identification as states 4 for evidence, do you recognize that document?
This is document document from the state of Florida, Department of Motor Vehicle, is to confirm that his license is out of Florida.
And what name is indicated on the Florida driver?
Ian Holt Bernard.
And what date did his license issue according to the state of Florida?
8/10/2020.
And what date does it expire?
8/2/2020. Or, yeah, 2020.
Thank you. And what is the address listed for Mr. Bernard on the Florida driver record?
63 Hemlock Street, 610, City of Keene, New Hampshire, 03433.
Does it list any addresses for him in the state of Florida on that record?
I do not see such an address.
The state would see to admit this in state's exhibit 4.
Do you have that?
No, yeah.
Exhibit 4 is the document from the state of Florida verifying the validity of the Florida license issued 8/10/12.
And Sergeant Short, is it your understanding that Mr. Bernard is a registered homeowner as reported at the Cheshire County Registry of Deeds in Keene?
I am aware of
And
this.
have you viewed a copy of the deed to his home prior to today?
Yes.
And what has been pre-marked as states Exhibit 5, what do you recognize that from?
Certificate of deed from the registration of deeds from Cheshire County, New Hampshire.
And what does that deed indicate?
It's May 19, 2006. This is the deed for address on 73 Duncan Street.
And the sole owner, as recorded, is who?
Ian Bernard, Nassau Drive, Sarasota.
I'd like to object to this evidence. It's dated. That house in question I no longer own, and I have the updated deed that was filed a couple weeks ago that shows that it's now owned by a church.
I'll accept the exhibit as evidence as to the ownership as of the date of the deed, and in your case, you can submit your information which indicates differently. So this is Exhibit 5.
Yes, please.
That's a certified copy of Volume 2346, page 76 of the Cheshire County Registry of Deeds.
And in the course of your investigation of this motor vehicle stop, did you have an occasion to go to the city hall or the state clerk's office at the city of Keene and specifically ask for any voter registration forms that are on file for Mr. Bernard or Mr. Freeman?
I did.
And did you receive copies of those voter registration forms?
I did.
And I'm handing you what has been pre-marked for identification as State's Exhibit 6. If you could look at those, that package information and indicate for the record whether you recognize those documents.
I do. These are the voter registrations when Mr. Bernard first moved to the area, first registered. One is dated September 18, 2006, which lists his name as Ian Bernard. Ian out of Sarasota is where he was born. Lists his last registration to vote, 5840 Country Wood Drive in Sarasota.
And what is the address he lists on that particular registration form as his present residence when he in fact registered?
39 Central Square, number 313.
Which one was that?
2006.
And if you could look at the next page and indicate what subsequent voter registration forms he has that are on file at the city.
The next one was filed in 2010. He's changed his name to Ian Freeman at this point. 73 Leverett Street.
Is what, his residence?
His residence address in Keene, New Hampshire. The mailing address is 63 Emerald Street, which I know to be shipping check. And his place of birth is still Sarasota, Florida. His last registration to vote was 39 Central Square, number 313 in Keene, New Hampshire.
And then again, does he have additional voter registration forms on file at the city of Keene that post-date that.
So it looks like the next one was in 2011. Listing 73 Leverett Street, Keene, as his residence, with the still mailing address of 63 Emerald Street with a different postbox number of 540.
And is that also in Keene? This mailing?
It is.
And does he have further registration forms on file?
Looks like there's one more. And just trying to get the This one is January 18, 2012. It's one to sign. And it still says 73 Leverett Street as his residence in the city of Keene. Place of birth still Sarasota, Florida. Birthday date 280. Don't know why there was a new one everyone was due.
And are there additional registration forms?
Yeah, there's one dated June 4, 2012. My name Ian Freeman, 73 Leverett Street, Keene, 280.
And has he signed all of those registration forms?
It appears that he has. Signatures appear consistent.
The state would seek to admit this in State's Exhibit 6.
Exhibit 6 is a compilation of the New Hampshire voter registration forms filed by Ian Freeman over a period since 2006. That's Exhibit 6.
Sergeant Short, are you also aware that Mr. Ian Freeman or Ian Bernard has at one point registered or filed a notice of candidacy for the office of mayor in the city of Keene?
I'm aware of this.
And did you previously review documents concerning that notice of candidacy prior to that?
Yes.
And when you knew what has been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 7, do you recognize that document?
It's a notice of candidacy, a letter of intent to run for mayor.
And that's the mayor.
Mayor in Keene. Yes.
And those, that notice of candidacy appears to be signed by Mr. Ian Bernard or Ian Freeman.
Yes, it's dated the 12th of August, 2000.
State would seek to admit this is State's Exhibit 7.
Object.
Number 7 is the notice of candidacy.
Thank you. And is it also your understanding, Sergeant Short, that Mr. Freeman and Mr. Bernard has recently filed a declaration of candidacy to become a school board member in the city of Keene?
Yes.
And have you reviewed documents associated with that notice of declaration of candidacy?
I have.
And I'm handing you what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 8. Do you recognize those documents, and if you could indicate for the record what they are?
It's a declaration of candidacy filed by Ian Freeman and an affidavit from the woman that took the declaration of candidacy from him, Diane Friedis.
And on what name? You said you used Ian Freeman as his name on that date.
Correct.
And what address did you list?
And this writes mailing or mail. I can't read the writing on this one. It's what it is. The 63 Emerald Street, box number 610, Keene, New Hampshire. He wrote in domiciled 73 Leverett Street, Keene, 343.
And what is the term of service for a school board member?
That's a 3-year term.
And again, the date of that declaration of candidacy is what?
January 23rd of this year, 2013.
The state would seek to admit this in State's Exhibit 8.
Exhibit 8 is the notice of candidacy for school board. Please continue.
Thank you. And lastly, the state would seek to admit police reports concerning a conviction Mr. Bernard has for a 2010 motor vehicle stop for misuse of plates. And it's relevant as it was the allegation, or he was convicted of misusing plates based on the same license plate that he had on the date of this particular stop, the Shire plate. And he was convicted of that. These are Chesterfield police reports. So I'd like to admit these as State's Exhibit 9.
Exhibit 9 is a certified copy of an abstracted conviction for misuse of the plates with, I just want to make sure that you're aware that it's with the report from the Chesterfield Police Department.
Thank you. And I have no further questions from Sergeant Short.
You get to question, we shut off your representative.
Yeah, I apologize for, he's a nice guy, but it's sometimes hard to connect to a video link. So I apologize for any disruption. But I do have some questions regarding the evidence, and I also have some questions regarding jurisdiction. So
We will finish with the state putting on their case. Once the state has put on their case, then I'll hear about that.
so you would be able to handle the question about jurisdiction, is that right?
No. I'll hear what you have to say.
Well, I've got questions, so I'm looking for answers. Would I be able to get those from you or from Mr. Short?
The questioning of Officer Short should relate to evidence that he has given or other things that he may know or other contacts he's had with you that he didn't discuss, anything that would be in his personal knowledge.
Can I call you Jason?
If that makes you feel better, go ahead.
Jason, if I asked for the facts proving where, when, why, and how you acquired your alleged jurisdiction over my life, could you provide them?
Objection, objection.
Well, I think jurisdiction is plenty relevant to this case because you have to have jurisdiction to move forward on any matter.
Well, I've already made several rulings on jurisdiction today,
So you've ruled that jurisdiction applies.
that I have the right to hold this hearing and the state had the right to present evidence that you were using the roads of the state of New Hampshire. Once they've established that, then I believe I have jurisdiction.
Can you tell me what factually jurisdiction is?
Objection, asked and answered. Or,
I've never had it
You already
explained.
ruled on that issue.
What do I need to say besides what I just said? They have now presented evidence that you used the roads of the state of New Hampshire. They have filed a complaint that use of the roads of the state of New Hampshire may be, I don't want to misquote the hearing notice. Maybe constitute misconduct, and that's the determination I have to make here today. And I have prima facie evidence that you have used the roads of the state of New Hampshire, and they believe that that use constitutes misconduct, and that's my jurisdiction.
Factually, what is the state?
Objection, relevant.
Well, the relevance is he's saying that I've used the roads of the state of New Hampshire, so I'd like to know what factually the state is.
I've already taken official notice that Route 9 in Keene is away in the state of New Hampshire.
I follow what you're saying there, but I'm wondering what factually defines the state? What is the state of New Hampshire? Are we talking about the ground? Are we talking about a political organization? What is the state factually? And I'll accept an answer from either of you.
I don't think it's relevant at this point.
So you're going to say that I was using the roads of the state, but you won't define what the state is.
I'll be happy to define it in my written decision, but in terms of the state's case, I don't think it's relevant.
Factually, how was the jurisdiction over me acquired?
I'm sticking with you used the roads of the state of New Hampshire. They filed a complaint about your use of those roads. I'm to determine today whether that use constitutes misconduct.
Does your control over me depend on my freely given consent?
You don't have to consent to this hearing today. You appeared, but if you hadn't appeared, we would have entered a default judgment against you.
Right, I appeared so I could get some answers to some very important questions to ask me some questions.
And I don't think the state's witness is qualified to give you those answers.
You don't think he's qualified to answer whether or not consent is involved in our relationship?
Do you think your witness is qualified to answer that question?
So regarding the evidence that has been presented, Jason, would you say that I'm a dangerous driver?
You're asking two different questions there. You want me to speak to the reason I stopped you and then whether that's dangerous. So
No, not about the reason you stopped me, but just in general.
And objection, his opinion isn't relevant.
It's really relevant. The reason for this hearing is to show, point number one, that I was driving to endanger the public.
The question on the hearings and hearing needs to be decided today is whether he's misusing and abusing driving privileges based on New Hampshire statutes. It's not relevant whether Sergeant Short has
Why
an
don't-
opinion on the
Will the state agree for purposes of the hearing notice where there were 4 points, the point number 1 is not at issue here today?
Yeah.
Just to be clear, we're crossing number one off the list.
And I pretty much crossed 3 and 4 off the list.
Just to bring, for whatever point of clarification, since even though that's not on the list, if you do look at that Florida driver record, which was, I believe, exhibit number 4, I don't think you'll see anything on that record. Would you confirm that there was nothing on that record?
If you need to review the record.
no, because there was nothing on it, but it's probably because you went in there.
Well, I believe that's the full record of the 26 years I spent in Florida.
Well, I don't think he's qualified to testify how long Florida keeps records of any convictions.
Nonetheless, are you aware of any dangerous driving convictions I've had in New Hampshire?
I'm not aware of any dangerous driving convictions.
Also, you brought up the summons that was written to me on the day in question that you were testifying about. What was that for?
Not obtaining New Hampshire driver's license within 60 days of establishing residency.
Do you know what happened to that summons, that complaint?
Objection to relevance.
It's been entered into evidence. It's clearly relevant.
I'll allow him to answer.
I believe it was no process.
That's correct. It was no prost. Do you know why that was no prost?
I can answer that since I was the one that made that decision.
But you're not the witness, so unless the witness knows.
I found out the same time you did, if you recall. We were standing next to each other.
Were you there? Were you present for the conversation that I had with Ms. Killam, where she admitted to me that the reason she was null crossing it was because she didn't have enough evidence, basically, to prove the case, and she wanted to come to the DMV, where she knew the burden of proof was lower. Do you recall?
Objection. That's not.
The question was he present for the conversation?
I was present for this.
And I'll accept that answer as not acknowledging the accuracy of your version of events, but simply that he was present for the conversation.
So regarding some of the paperwork that has been submitted here regarding voting and such, you did point out that on the voting form that I had filled in something on under residence. Is it possible that I filled that in based on that was where I was domiciled at the time?
Well, I guess that's a matter of opinion on what your definition is. I don't know if we can have it to where you define yourself as one way to try to get away from the rules and procedures of the state of New Hampshire.
Do you recall in Exhibit 8, which was the candidacy notice for school board, did I cross out the word reside and write in domicile on that?
You did, and that was part of my investigation of why that was even allowed.
And they did allow that form in, correct? Because I was on the ballot for
They did,
school
because
board.
it doesn't matter if you can't personally alter the form, so it's not legally binding to it. So it doesn't matter if you cross that specific line; you're still bound by it.
Are you familiar with the requirements to run for office in New Hampshire?
In what way?
Well, do you know that one does not need to be a resident to run for office in New Hampshire?
Well, I don't know that because there's been so much talk about Scott Brown having to be a resident, that he owns a house and is going to move here. So I really think you have to be a resident to start running for state elected positions.
But you don't really know. That's just your opinion.
No, it's been on WMER for the past political thing.
Just because something was on television doesn't mean it's true, right?
Doesn't mean it's not true either.
But just to be clear, you don't really know for sure what the requirements are to run.
I know the
political office.
requirements to run for school board are that you be registered to vote.
That's correct.
But I believe that to run for city office or like the ward, you have to live in the ward that you run for. Assume that you have to live in the town that you live in to be the mayor, and that would then make you have to reside there.
That's a legal conclusion. I'll object to that. Because
You asked me
That's
if I
fine, you
believe-
noted your objection, and you did reach a legal conclusion.
point of clarification on the various different voter registration forms that had been sent in, or that had been submitted here. I don't recall the exhibit number, but did I also file domicile affidavits with those forms?
I don't remember that being part of that. I'd have to review it as well. There's a lot of them.
At least one. Did I file at least one of the domicile affidavits?
Well, as we spoke to already, with the crossing of things out, it's not legally running up. You see in 06, you crossed out, I'm declaring New Hampshire as my domicile. I'm subject to the laws of the state of New Hampshire, which apply to all residents, including laws requiring me to register on motor vehicles and apply to New Hampshire driver's license in 60 days of becoming a resident.
Just a point of clarification before you go on to answer my original question, since you brought that statement up, pointing out that I crossed out certain portions of the voter registration form. My voter registration form was accepted even with those words crossed out. Are you saying that when one crosses out words from an agreement and then signs it, that magically the words become uncrossed out? I'm sorry.
Objection relevant.
Well, he's making a legal conclusion.
He made a statement earlier that I'm giving little weight, that if you cross something out on a form, it's not valid. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm not accepting it as an expert.
All I know is that everything I've ever crossed out on forms has been accepted. I have been able to register to vote with crossing certain things out and making changes. So, was there a domicile affidavit in there? Did you see that?
I haven't seen a domicile affidavit yet.
I believe it's...
Unless it's... Oh, is this little piece here?
No. If you want to hand it to me.
Maybe I'm missing it. So
That might be it right there.
oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. I skipped it. Current domicile 73 Leverage Street.
Does it say anything about residency on the domicile affidavit?
This is for the voting.
Do you know anything about the domicile affidavit? Have you ever seen one of those before?
No, I haven't seen it. I would take a guess that it's for college students when you come and go here and register.
Is that because a college student doesn't need to be a resident to register to
Objection
vote?
relevant.
But that's sustained.
Once again, do you see anything about residency on the domicile affidavit?
Unless there's something specific that you're trying to point out to me.
Anything about, anything about the word residency or residence on there?
If I'm looking for those specific words,
Yeah.
that you're asking. No.
Nope. You mentioned that the plate that you saw in the car was what you considered a novelty plate.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about what you mean?
I mean, it's not a real plate.
What do
It's
you-
something
what do
that
you-
I believe that you made it. Or
What
somebody
defines a
just-
real plate?
One that's recognized by any of the states or the area of Washington, D.C.
How do you know it's not recognized?
I'm not familiar with it. It's not any books that I've ever seen.
Are you familiar with the roughly 200 nations in the world?
Am I familiar with roughly 200 nations in the world?
Do you know them all?
Objection relevant.
I don't know them all.
The answer is appropriate.
So you don't know all the nations of the world. So if you saw a nation from a small island, for instance, you might not necessarily know that that's a legitimate nation.
You mean just upon the site?
Right. Let's say you saw another plate, another strange name that you've never seen before.
Driving in
Driving in
compromise the United States. I would find that to be odd.
Would it be illegal?
I believe that it's legal for a few countries. One being Canada is accepted. Recognize those plates. I'm not quite sure about the other, like Mexico, if they can come in across and have an agreement.
So you are, as a police officer, you're given a list of countries that are acceptable.
I've never been given such list. I do know that Canada is allowed to cross over and drive on their plates.
What about a European car?
I've never seen a European car come over.
Is it
specifically.
acceptable?
Objection.
Don't believe
relevance.
so.
Well, the relevance is he's making a statement about the Shire, which if you look at the, I don't know if you included that,
But I don't know if his knowledge of every country in the world is relevant to whether the Shire is a jurisdiction that can issue plates that would be recognized in the United States, so it's not a relevant question.
well, what I'm asking about is what is acceptable as far as, he's saying the Shire plate is not acceptable on the
I think
roads.
he's answered the question by saying that as far as he's aware, Mexico and Canada are acceptable in the United States, and that's as far as his answer has gone.
Right, but beyond Mexico and Canada, if someone were to have a plate from another place, like let's say Cuba or Spain, would that be acceptable?
I would say for Cuba, no.
But Spain?
Potentially, I guess if I saw a Spanish plate, that I would stop it and look for proper documentation there.
If that person with a Spanish plate had a driver's license that seemed to be legitimate, would that be okay?
Objection. Relevance. There's no.
We're back to relevance. What does this have to do with your situation, talking about theoretical other countries?
Well, he was saying that the Shire plate was a novelty, and I'm trying to establish that it is as legitimate as any other plate.
I don't think your questioning is doing that, and you're going to have to try and establish that by your evidence and testimony, and asking him questions is not going to further that issue.
Regardless, are you familiar with the instance out of Chesterfield that was referenced in the evidence earlier, the misuse of plates conviction?
I was not aware of it, or I probably would have taken a different action that day.
What do you mean?
I probably would have issued you summons for misuse of plates as well, as opposed to the warning and let you change your plate from the front to the back.
Do you know that misuse of plates only applies to cars that are registered in state of New Hampshire?
I'd have to review that statute again.
Can you have that statute handy?
I don't believe you can just throw a plate on a car. Because the car's from California and you put on a California plate and drive around, then it's still you can get misuse of plates if it's not supposed to be there.
Can you read the full statute?
Can you read it first?
Sure.
Any person who knowingly attaches or permits to be attached to a vehicle a number plate assigned by the department or authority of any other jurisdiction to another vehicle, or who knowingly obscures or permits to be obscured the figures or letters on any number plate attached to any vehicle, or who knowingly and deliberately fails to display on a vehicle the number plates and the registration number duly issued, therefore shall be guilty of a violation.
So if you were to pull up the evidence, which I don't recall which the number was, but from the 2010 misuse of plates conviction with the report from Dwayne Chickering out of Chesterfield. Can we pull that, please?
That's the last one, wasn't it?
Exhibit 9 for the record.
If you look through there, I think that you'll see that the car in that
I
question.
can actually object because this witness didn't testify to anything that concerned this particular incident in Chesterfield. I think if he wants to make a legal argument at a later point, that would be more appropriate.
At this point, I'm going to allow the question and see where we go. And if it keeps going down the rabbit trail, we'll put on to it.
This is pretty clear. So if you look through that evidence, you'll see that the car in question was registered in New Hampshire, but it did not have a New Hampshire plate on it, hence misuse of plates. But what you'll see is with the case, as you already admitted in your testimony, the car in question that I was driving when you pulled me over was registered in Wisconsin. Therefore, it's not a misuse of plates to...
You're testifying, and this doesn't sound like a question at this point. You're making a point.
I guess the question is, do you understand that New Hampshire statutes can't apply to a Wisconsin plate?
Potentially that calls for a legal conclusion.
Just based on what you just read, give me your opinion as a law enforcement officer.
Well, I know just from living around the country that certain states have 2 plates, certain states have 1. I generally know which ones do. Like Wisconsin, for example, issues 1 plate. It should be placed on the back, so you can see. And that's the standard place for 1 plate states to have is on the back. I've never seen a state that has a 1 plate state have just the license plate on the front and allow you to put anything you want on the back. It's always the reverse. So, in essence, that's what it would be. In essence, a misuse of place is not properly attached to where it's supposed to be. And that's why that day I had Mr. Freeman here take his Shire plate and put it in the front, which it still is affixed to the front properly, and then the Wisconsin's at the back.
Can I see that misuse statute again?
He's already read it into the record.
I'd just like to review it.
Okay.
But I don't think it just, like, to say that it doesn't speak that I can only enforce New Hampshire registered vehicles with that. If you have a New Hampshire registered vehicle but you put a Wisconsin plate on it, it's still a misuse, even though it might be registered. If you take the New Hampshire registration off, I'm not saying that this is what you did, I'm using an example, and you put a plate from a different state, or even, let's say, my own, I had plates from Pennsylvania still.
That would be a misuse of plates because the car's registered.
But if I registered, what if I didn't register at all ever?
If you didn't register the car ever.
Then it's unregistered car. Potentially misuse of plates because you put fake plates on there.
Well, then we're getting into a whole other conversation about obligation to register, but...
Well, I'm just saying an example. Like, I have Pennsylvania plates, but I have cars in New Hampshire that are registered. Well, if one day I decide just to put my Pennsylvania plates on and drive around,
that's misuse of plates because the car is registered in New Hampshire.
But if I then jumped into a car that's totally unregistered and still put my Pennsylvania or New Hampshire plates on, it's still misuse of plates and it's an unregistered vehicle.
That's true, but that doesn't apply, as you pointed out, to this case, because as you agreed earlier, this car is legally registered in Wisconsin.
Correct.
Okay, so therefore, if, let's just say, and I don't know, because it's not my car, but let's just say that Wisconsin has an inspection sticker. Can you write a ticket for an uninspected Wisconsin car?
In this state, no, other states do allow their officers to do that.
You don't have statutory authority to do that.
I don't write for...
Okay, I think that's enough on that particular issue. Is the state of New Hampshire a government?
Objection relevance.
I'm just trying to understand what we're dealing with here.
The definition of the state of New Hampshire is probably provided in statute somewhere.
Probably.
I can't give you the section. That's why I'm saying I believe that it's defined in statute, but this witness is not going to further the case today by attempting to answer that question.
Are you saying the witness is incompetent to testify in regards to the matter of his employer?
No, I'm saying that this witness can testify to things within his knowledge, and the state has objected, and it would not appear that the answer to that question is within his knowledge.
So since he can testify to things within his knowledge, did you swear an oath to uphold the New Hampshire Constitution?
I did.
Have you read it?
Have you?
Yeah.
Objection relevance.
I have read it. I haven't read it recently.
That's okay. That's okay. Are you familiar with the first article in the Bill of Rights?
Objection relevance.
What's the relevance?
Well, for whatever reason, I don't happen to have it in front of me, but you have the New Hampshire Constitution. You have a copy of that?
It's not part of my statute book, and I had a few sections of the Constitution that I had put together here, but the first article was not.
Give me a moment, I can pull it up here.
And while you're pulling it up, the relevance of the question is,
Oh, well, you said he can testify to things within his purview, and certainly he has.
but what's the relevance of the question to the case?
Well, whether or not.
I mean, since you have a general knowledge of what the first article says.
Yeah. Well, the first article is all about one's consent to the government. So it lays out in article number 1 here, and it's coming up, the equality of, for the record, all men born equally free and independent, or all men are born equally free and independent. Therefore, all government of right originates from the people, is founded in consent, and instituted for the general good.
Okay, so what's the relevance of that to this witness and his ability to answer the question?
I guess my question is the government founded in consent?
Well, you're asking me an opinion now.
I'm just asking you to acknowledge what you just heard and swore an oath to.
I guess it's interpretation of what that means can be different. Mine can be greatly different than yours on what that means. You would maybe argue that if you don't personally give consent, that can't apply to you. Another interpretation that I would hold is that through the greater good, the populace, what the founders envisioned was that they would establish an elected position at the federal government level and dictate rights to the different states to set up their own forms of government in that mirror image or how they so fit. They hold elections. The people then democratically hold elections, elect people to speak for them. And
Didn't it happen the other way around, where the states created the federal government, and then they kind of dictated to them?
Well, I mean,
Again, I don't see how any of this is relevant to today's hearing.
Is there any relevance?
Just establishing how this whole situation came about in the first place.
I'll allow you to make your arguments after the state's finished, but I don't think asking this officer his opinion about
Let's get back to the case then.
consent of the governed is relevant, and I would give it no weight anyway.
Let's get back to the case. You mentioned that you had done some level of investigation, contacting the state of Florida, or looking into past driving records and that sort of thing. Is that correct?
yeah, I did some investigation throughout the city, yes.
Throughout the what?
The city, I went to the different areas.
The departments.
Talked to different departments of, where we filed.
Did you initiate that investigation, or were you following orders?
No, I did it on my own.
And since this case is about residency to some extent, you're making the allegation that I am a resident. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you define residency?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
We have a statute that defines residency, and whether he knows what that statute says or not.
Well, if he doesn't know,
I will refer to the statute in terms of definition. And
if he doesn't know what a resident
I'm
is,
saying
how
his,
can he
I'm saying
investigate
his either reading the statute into the record or saying his impression of what a resident is won't hold any weight for me if he gives an improper interpretation. If I read the statute, I will give it what interpretation I think it deserves, and what he says wouldn't be relevant.
that? So I wasn't looking for him to read the statute. I was looking for his understanding of what a resident is. If he's the one who's investigating
and
that,
if his understanding isn't square with the statute will prevail.
so let's go ahead and look at the statute then. I believe the definition is in section 21.6. Definition of resident. Would you mind reading section 21.6 into the record?
Objection again, I don't think this is relevant
Well, if you don't think it's relevant whether or not I'm a resident, let's just
calls
throw this
for-
whole case out.
It calls for a legal conclusion. He can make a legal argument.
I'm not asking for a legal conclusion. I'm asking to read the statute. You can read it in the
Well,
record. if you'd like.
I can take official notice that we have a statute that defines resident, and I'm fine with you reading it into the record.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read that then. Section 21.6 of the New Hampshire RSAs defines resident and inhabitant. It says a resident or inhabitant or both of this state and of any city, town, or other political subdivision of this state shall be a person who is domiciled or has a place of abode or both in this state and in any city, town, or other political subdivision of this state, and who has, through all of his actions, demonstrated a current intent to designate that place of abode as his principal place of physical presence for the indefinite future to the exclusion of all others. But that's not all. I'd also like to enter into the record section 259:88 of the New Hampshire RSAs, which further defines resident. Now, to point of clarification, section 259:88 does not define inhabitant. The first section I read, 21.6, does have inhabitant essentially defined the same as resident, but section 259:88 goes on to add further definition to just the term resident. And it is as follows. Resident shall mean a resident of the state as defined in section 21.6, except that no person shall be deemed to be a resident who claims residence in any other state for any purpose. So, with that in mind, Jason, what's the difference between resident and inhabitant?
Objection.
His opinion won't matter. It's going to be what I think.
Is it your position that one does not have to choose to be a resident?
Objection. His opinion isn't. It's not relevant.
I think choice is fully at the matter, and that's really what we're talking about here.
You'll be able to make that argument.
Now, is it your opinion that I'm obligated to be a resident?
Objection. His opinion isn't relevant.
Sustained.
I don't think I have any other. When do you want me to submit this deed as evidence after the testimony?
As soon as I turn the case over.
I don't think I have any other questions. Thanks, Jason.
Any follow-up questions to that, Attorney Kelly? This would be your time to present any evidence that you would like to present, sir.
And just for the record, I have not received any reciprocal discovery from Mr. Bernard.
Would you like to take a look at it?
Why don't you show her that?
This is a quitclaim deed that was filed on the 27th of June, which is a little after, I believe, when you guys pulled details for the property in question, 73 and 75 Leverett Street. It's a copy of that deed. The deed in question shows that I no longer own the home that they were discussing, that it is now owned by the Shire Free Church. The Shire Free Church. So if there's no objection, I'd like to submit that as an exhibit.
And if you are going to be giving sworn testimony, I need you to raise your right hand, sir.
Am I obligated to do that?
Yes?
Obligated to give testimony?
You have to give... Oh, I said if you are going to be giving testimony.
Can you give me a moment to look over my notes?
Sure. I'm sorry, I thought you were asking if you were obligated to take an oath if you were giving testimony.
Right, I see what you're saying. Before we go on, can you tell me a little, I've never really had much experience with these hearings. I've been to court, and obviously this has some of the same trappings, but can you explain to me a little bit more about there are these 3 different points, or 4 different points on why I could be hazardous to public safety and need to have operator privileges revoked. We've already crossed off point 1, clearly not a danger to the driving danger to the public. You also mentioned crossing off point 3 and point 4, which have to do with drug problems. So point 2 is a law enforcement officer has reported you for misconduct. Can you tell me more about, what level of concern the DMV would have around that particular point? What sort of, evidence you're looking at or looking for? How much misconduct are we talking about? What kind of misconduct?
Just double check the statute because the hearing notice doesn't always carry everything that the statute does. 26356H says, is a hazard to the public safety as evidenced by proper evidence or information received from a law enforcement officer of misconduct or misuse or abuse of driving privileges. That's as far as it's defined, and it's up to me today to determine whether, based on the evidence they have presented, that you meet the criteria set forth in that statute.
So ultimately, the question of residency really has no bearing on misconduct.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that.
You wouldn't? Why is that?
Because the basis of their petition today is that we have a law that says that you have to get a New Hampshire license when you reside in 60 days. So residency has a lot to do with this, because since they have given me evidence that you have resided in New Hampshire for something like 7 years and have never obtained a New Hampshire license, I have to make a determination as to whether I think that that is a misuse or abuse of driving privileges in the state.
So are you saying that you have heard evidence that I'm a resident today?
I have evidence that would support their position that you are a resident.
Is residency something that has to be chosen, or is it something that can be foisted upon an individual?
I will take all the evidence that I've heard today and I will make a determination as to whether I think the evidence indicates that you are a resident by actions you have taken.
Just so we are clear, Section 25988 does make it clear that a resident, no person shall be deemed to be a resident who claims residence in any other state for any purpose. So,
I'm aware of that statute.
So is it your belief that you have jurisdiction over me?
For the reasons stated previously, you have used the roads of the state of New Hampshire. They've made a prima facie case that they believe that you are engaged in misconduct in using those roads, and I believe I have jurisdiction to make a determination on their evidence and whatever evidence you need. Because you have used the roads, and the Commissioner of Safety has jurisdiction over the use of the roads in the state of New Hampshire.
Factually, what is the state?
If you'd like me to address that in my written opinion, I will.
I would like that.
I'm not going to get engaged in this discussion as part of the hearing. I want to hear evidence. I don't want to hear you asking me questions about the law. I will have to consider the evidence I've heard today and put together a thoughtful written opinion.
All right. Well, I will enter some testimony into this case.
Raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter today to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I affirm I tell the truth.
That's fine. And to identify yourself for the record, please.
I'm Ian Freeman, formerly known as Ian Bernard.
And just as a matter of clarification, I think you said at one point that you have a paper that indicates that you have made that change. And
Point of clarification, there's a Supreme Court case in New Hampshire, Moskowitz versus Moskowitz, that makes it clear that an individual may change their name in New Hampshire by simply having done so and using a new name, so long as it's not done for fraudulent purposes. Not all courts have recognized that change, but some courts have proceeded with my name, Ian Freeman. I do have a voter registration under the name Ian Freeman, so there's no probate court paperwork about that, but it's an established name.
I thought you said earlier you had paper.
Well, I have court papers that show the name Ian
I was
Freeman.
looking for a court order that.
No, I don't have anything from probate court.
To change your name to probate. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I'm not that hung up on what you're being known by. We referred to you as both ways today, but I just wanted to see if you had a court paper. I look at it, you don't have a court paper, nobody knows that. And
So Ms. Killam has
I'm also required under the rules to ask you your address.
63 Emerald Street, number 610, which actually was incorrect when y'all sent me the paperwork. You had number 160 down, so you may want to update that. That's 63 Emerald Street.
610?
Yeah, 610.
Okay.
And that's in Keene.
And your date of birth.
8280.
All right, the floor is yours, sir.
Great. So apparently it's Ms. Killam's allegation that I'm a resident, and she has presented a variety of paperwork stating that she believes, based on these things, that I'm a resident. And from my understanding of New Hampshire statutes, it's pretty clear. 25988 says that residents, no person shall be deemed to be a resident who claims residence in any other state for any purpose. So that to me makes it pretty clear that residency is something someone has to seek out. It's something that an individual has to consent to. We were talking about that briefly earlier, the idea of consent. I have yet to be given any reason why someone would want to be a resident, but it is a fairly common thing for individuals to feel like they need to establish residency upon moving to a new plot of land. But from what I can tell, residency is a legal term, and there are certain legal obligations that come along with being a resident. However, as is made clear in New Hampshire Statute 21.6, one can be, and this is all in your system. I don't necessarily consent to it, but this is your system, these are your rules, your statutes, that there is these alternate legal status known as inhabitant. And we know from, there's actually currently a case, I believe, in front of the Supreme Court where they're discussing some of these issues with regards to college students being able to register to vote here in New Hampshire. And college students aren't necessarily residents. And nobody is necessarily a resident from my interpretation of all of this, unless that's something that they want, unless that's something that they seek. They have to establish that residency. It has to be an intentional thing. And with me, it's not intentional. And the evidence of that is clear with the voter registration forms that, well, the voter registration forms do say residence on them. On that point, I will simply say I did not realize that it said residence, or that would be used against me as evidence of residency. But in recent years, more recent years, the school board registration, which is from this year, 2013, I clearly crossed out reside and wrote the words in M domicile to make it clear that I'm not intending to be a resident. And I understand that I can run for political office and I can be in the geographic area known as New Hampshire as an inhabitant without being a resident, simply because I can choose to be a resident anywhere I want, and New Hampshire statutes say that if I choose it elsewhere, then I'm not a resident here in New Hampshire. So with that in mind, let's see if there's some other points. It is not a requirement, by the way, to be a resident to run for any office. If you were to pull up the Secretary of State's website, look at the qualifications for office, the only requirement is that one be registered to vote. And in order to register to vote, one also does not need to be a resident. One simply needs to be inhabiting New Hampshire and being willing to swear. In fact, if you look at my voter registration forms, I did not register to vote with identification or with any proof of living in any particular place. In New Hampshire, you can do that, simply by signing affidavits that, say that I'm domiciled at this location and that I'm not going to vote anywhere else. The idea is that if you're going to vote here, you can't vote in New York, or you can't vote, in the town next door. So it's pretty clear that one doesn't need to be a resident to run for office, and one doesn't need to be a resident to register to vote. One can choose residency elsewhere and be a resident elsewhere, which I have done. Owning a home, even if I did still own that home, it wouldn't matter because it's not proof of residency, because I haven't chosen to become a resident. I haven't sought residency whatsoever. We've already pointed out that I'm not a danger on the roads. I've never been in an accident. There's no record whatsoever of any kind of dangerous driving whatsoever on my record, either here in New Hampshire or in Florida. So the idea that I'm a danger to anybody is ridiculous. Basically, this is...
I think we pushed back that.
Right. So basically, this is political persecution. Just to bring you up to speed, I'm an activist. I am somebody who is somewhat visible. I have a nationally syndicated talk radio program that I do for a living, and I'm an advocate of freedom and more freedom for more people who haven't hurt anybody else. I'm a critic of some of the things that law enforcement does. Others I appreciate when they stop real bad guys. I like that. But when they're going after people who haven't hurt anybody else, that's when I start to get an issue. And some people in the area of Keene don't really appreciate that very much. They don't like the ideas of freedom.
I'm not sure if this is relevant to this hearing. Is it opinions about?
I'm going to let it go on.
Okay.
Yep. So anyway, was pointing out the reason why this hearing is happening in the first place. It's political targeting. They're trying to punish me for being an activist. There's a lot of evidence about this. My house, or what was my house, has been targeted by code enforcement for ridiculous violations, which never held up in court. They recently lost a case, which was kicked out by the judge because they were threatening me over not having interconnected smoke alarms installed in the house. And just the most petty issues they could possibly bring up just to simply harass me and target me. And that's really what this hearing is about today. Not that Jason would necessarily do that. I think he's a good guy. I don't really know Gene here, but that's what I think is actually happening here. I'm not a resident because I claim residency elsewhere, and case closed. I'm not a dangerous driver, and so I don't think that I should be prevented from traveling from one point to another in a safe manner.
Do you have questions?
I do. So when did you, prior to New Hampshire, where were you living?
I lived in Florida previously.
And when was that? When did you move to New Hampshire?
Well, let me clarify. I've lived in the landmass commonly known as Florida. When did I move?
And when was that?
Would be back in 2006.
So would you say it's a fair and accurate statement to say New Hampshire's been your primary physical place of presence?
There's a plot of land that people commonly call New Hampshire, but I don't consent to the state of New Hampshire, which is a political organization. And sometimes people confuse the two, and that's something that benefits the state. When they talk about New Hampshire, they might be talking about a body politic, or a group of people that has come together for certain political reasons or purposes. I inhabit a place commonly called New Hampshire.
And you've been here, primarily your physical place of presence has been in Keene since 2006. Would you agree with that?
It really doesn't matter where my body has been located. If you're trying to establish residency...
She's asked you a direct question.
Well, if you're trying to establish residency, I don't claim residency in New Hampshire.
She's asked you a direct question, and you're not answering.
Can you rephrase that?
Would you agree that your primary physical place of presence and being has been in Keene, New Hampshire since 2006?
I would have to have you define what Keene, New Hampshire is.
You refer to Keene in your various organizations. You have a website that's called Free Keene, correct?
That's right, I do have that website.
And so Keene must mean a place to you, correct?
There are certain places, there are certain plots of land that have common names attached to them.
The place that most of us refer to Keene, would you agree that you've been living there primarily in Keene since 2006?
I would say I inhabit a place that's commonly known as Keene.
More often?
but not the political subdivision.
More so than any other place, any other state, correct?
I don't inhabit any states. I just inhabit a plot of land.
But you actively live in New Hampshire, correct?
Actively live in New Hampshire. I live in a place, some people call it New Hampshire, I call it the Shire, actually. Because I've opted out of the New Hampshire state. I don't believe in the idea of states. I think that states are inherently violent organizations that are not operating by consent. And so I've withdrawn that consent, if it ever had it, and it never did. But just to make it clear, I've joined the Shire Society at shiresociety.com, where we operate peacefully with one another and don't threaten peaceful people. So I inhabit the Shire.
You're physically present in New Hampshire more than any other state. Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
I'm not present in any state. I don't support the idea of states. That's your idea. That's your religion.
The place that most people refer to as New Hampshire. You're physically present here in New Hampshire more than any other state. Do you agree with that?
Just because you believe in states doesn't mean that I have to believe in states.
Excuse me for a moment, but if I remember my constitutional law correctly, I believe the states are subdivisions of the United States of America, so are you disavowing the whole idea of the United States of America?
Well, the whole idea is it's fallacious. There are several.
I think it's legal, sir.
Well, there's plenty of things that are legal, but that doesn't mean that they're real. So what we're talking about here is really a religious belief system.
So your representative, whoever he was today, kept referring to constitutional authority, but it sounds like you don't recognize any constitutional authority anyway.
Well, he was asking you about your own rules and your statutes. These are things that you guys have sworn an oath to, that you believe in, and that's fine.
But he was making numerous points about constitutional authority, and I guess I'm trying to figure out if you recognize any constitution of any political.
Well, I have not signed any of those constitutions, so I'm not a party to those agreements.
But your representative wanted to stand on those documents as a reason for me not to hold this hearing.
Well, I think
so are you, on the one hand, looking for the protections that they provide, and on the other hand, refusing to recognize that you have to?
I think you misunderstood. I think there's a lot that didn't transfer over the video link. I think that what he was pointing out was that
I heard his words quite well, sir.
I think that what he was pointing out was that you guys have this constitution. He's sworn the oath to it. I don't know if you have, but this is your set of rules. This is your society. It's not mine. I've joined the Shire Society, and that's because the U.S., even your own Supreme Court, has ruled that the government has no obligation to provide any sort of services whatsoever, that they have no obligation to protect. If they do protect, it's nice, and I appreciate that, but there's no obligation, and so therefore...
I appreciate the citation.
Oh, we've got Google right here if you'd like to...
No, I want you to tell me the authority for what you just said.
The U.S. Supreme Court in multiple cases. All you have to do is Google search. No obligation to protect.
We'll move on. You haven't given me a specific answer.
Well, if you'd like, I can take a moment to look it up. Well, you did ask specifically for the what I was saying.
I thought maybe you had it right there. I'm not asking you to take time to do it.
I'm happy to take the time.
No. I'm running the hearing, and I want you to continue with the device.
Then you'll just have to accept that.
I'm not accepting, but move on.
So you don't believe that there's no obligation to protect?
Move on.
Mr. Bernard, you get your mail here.
Excuse me for one moment. So just a point of clarification. If there's no obligation to protect, then therefore there is no duty of allegiance in response, and so therefore there can be no citizen. And so yes, the entire idea of the United States is a sham. Absolutely.
Why don't you continue the question?
Thank you. Mr. Bernard, Mr. President, you get your mail in Keene, correct?
In Keene, I get my mail at the shipping shack, which some people would say is in a place called Keene.
And you vote in Keene, correct?
Yep, I've gone and voted.
Regularly since 2006, correct?
Off and on.
You haven't registered to vote in any other state other than New Hampshire, is that right?
Previously, I had registered in Florida.
Prior to 2006, though,
That's correct.
Not after 2006.
No, that's right.
What, if any, affirmative steps did you take to get your Florida license reinstated back on August 10th of 2012?
What affirmative
What, if any,
steps?
affirmative steps? Did you do anything to have that?
Well, I was in the place commonly known as Florida at the time when it was time to renew that driver's license. And because I know nice gentlemen like this will put me in a cage if I don't have one of those cards, I did go ahead and go through the process of renewing.
And so what steps did you take to renew that license?
I went to the DMV in Florida and followed the procedure.
And you listed your Keene address as your place of residence on your,
Oh, no.
according to Florida DMV. Would you agree that that's the address that they have on their motor vehicle record?
Should have moved that. Maybe it was a mailing address. I think that should have my Briar Creek. Let's see.
And case on no duty to protect is foreign BDC.
There you go. Warren versus the District of Columbia. Feel free to look that up at your leisure. But that's only one of many cases where
The District of Columbia is not a state.
Supreme Court.
it's a Supreme Court case.
But I'm saying, how could that apply if the District of Columbia is not a state?
I don't understand what your question is.
It said Warren versus District of Columbia, so it must have been against the governmental subdivision called the District of Columbia, which is not a state.
Yeah, it's not a state, but what's the relevance of your question?
We were talking about states when you referred to that case.
But you had brought up the question about the United States and whether or not I recognized it.
Right. And we were talking about the state of the United States and the state of New Hampshire being a recognized state within the United States, and then you threw out that case as standing for something, and now it sounds like it was a case that didn't involve a state.
Right, you had asked, I'm sorry, point of clarification, you had asked me about, your question was, and obviously we can't rewind the tape here, but your question was about, well, do you disavow the United States? And I pointed out that the whole idea of government is the idea of citizen. If you look up the definition in the legal dictionary or any dictionary, is that a citizen is one who owes a duty of allegiance, meaning I do what I'm told, in order to get an obligation of protection from the state or the federal government or whatever government we're talking about here. And the Supreme Court, Warren versus DC, is one of many cases, has ruled in several instances that no state, no governmental entity, no bureaucracy has any obligation to provide any services to anybody.
And my only
no
point
obligation to
is
protect.
the District of Columbia is not a state, so I was questioning if it's really.
It's a political subdivision of the U.S.
Well, let's move on. Let's
So,
answer this question about Florida.
Yeah, I don't understand why Florida on their what is this, transcript of driver record does not have the actual address, which is on the driver's license, which is 1774 Briar Creek Lane. This came from you, right? Yeah.
Okay, should I see your license?
Sure. 1776 Briar Creek. That's my girlfriend in Florida.
It says 1774.
I thought it was 1776.
Okay, I'm just reading from here.
1776 Constitution. I got a little mixed up there.
Okay, please continue to
Thank you. Mr. Bernard, when
Can you call me Freeman, please?
Freeman, when you renewed your license in Florida, you used the name Ian Bernard, correct? That's the name that appears in your license?
Yeah, the reason for that is because I haven't gone through whatever the process is yet in Florida to achieve a name change down there. I've been working on establishing the name Ian Freeman for a number of years now. I think I started using it in 09 or somewhere around there. And so, there's certain things that need to be done to make sure that that's easier to accomplish. But yeah, so since they knew me previously as Ian Bernard, I continued on that.
And it's your last voter registration form on file at the Keene City Clerk's office, in fact, which is predated your renewal of your Florida driver's license on January 18th, 2012. Do you agree with that statement?
Okay, right. So you're saying I registered in
In January 2012,
Mhm.
prior to your renewal of your driver's license.
Yeah.
And you used the name Ian Freeman, correct? And filled out the voter registration form in New Hampshire?
What's the relevance here?
No question. Answer the question.
Yeah.
And you listed the voter registration form specifically called for residence on the form. Would you agree with that?
It did, but as I pointed out earlier, that doesn't mean that I'm a resident. That's as when I was asking the clerk about that, she said she needed my domicile address. So I probably should have, in retrospect, I probably should have crossed that out and written domicile on there, but I didn't think about that at the time.
And you signed the form, correct? You signed all the voter registration forms. Would you agree with that?
Of course, yeah.
And you agree that there's a statement indicating that any false information provided on your voter registration form is a crime?
Yeah, are you alleging there's false information there?
She's asking the question, sir.
Would you agree with that?
That is what the statement says.
And you observed that prior to your signature?
Yes or no from the audio recording?
Yeah.
Can Ms. Killam speak up for the audio recording too, please? This is a hearing. I can't hear much of what she's saying.
Are you affiliated with the radio show?
With what radio show?
Any radio show?
Yep, I have a nationally syndicated talk show.
And on that radio show, do you tell your listeners that you don't have any intention of leaving New Hampshire?
I don't know if I've ever said that. And my intentions can change anytime.
Do you have any intention of leaving New Hampshire?
Well, I don't know if we've established that I'm in New Hampshire. What do you mean by New Hampshire?
Where you are?
I don't want to go around this little maypole every time that New Hampshire comes up, so for purposes of answering these questions, you've previously qualified it as a political subdivision known as New Hampshire, and can we stick with that?
Right, I just want to make sure that it's clear that I don't necessarily...
You've made that clear, sir.
Okay, just making sure we're clear on that. I like living in the place commonly known as New Hampshire because I like most of the people here. It's a nice place, but I could leave if I wanted.
Do you have any intentions of leaving?
I can't say for sure at the moment. I'm not sure. Maybe I will.
And you're looking to become a prominent figure in Keene by running for mayor and school board member, is that right?
Not particularly. I would say I'm already somewhat prominent based on some press coverage and a variety of different things that have happened. I don't think prominence has anything to do with running for political office. It's really more of a way to reach out to the public and explain to them the ideas of freedom. That's really, to me, what running for political office is about. It's a way to get ideas on the radio and to get them in the newspaper where people can see them and give them consideration. I'm not really interested in winning so much as I am getting the word out.
So you're actively interested in being a community activist in Keene specifically?
I'm, again, not the political subdivision of Keene, but I'm active. Yeah, I think that's why you guys are targeting me.
The vehicle that you were driving on the date Sergeant Short stopped you had indicated there's evidence that the vehicle is registered in Wisconsin. Is that true?
That is my understanding. It's not my car.
Do you regularly use that vehicle?
Every now and then, if I need to go to the grocery store.
More than any other vehicle?
Probably. Well, I don't know what vehicle is. Can you define that for me? Because I ride my bicycle a lot, and I would say I use that more than anything else. Can you define vehicle for me? Is a bicycle a vehicle?
The question is withdrawn.
Question's
And I have no
withdrawn.
further questions.
Anything you want to add at this point, sir?
It seemed like Ms. Killam was alleging that I put some false information on the voter form, which, of course, if that were true, they would be able to bring some sort of charges. I don't know if that's perjury or what that charge would be, but
I think at this point the form speaks for itself.
yeah, I don't think there's any false information on there. Otherwise, they would have brought some sort of charge against me because in New Hampshire, you can use whatever name you darn well please for yourself, so long as it's not engaging in fraudulent activity. And everybody here knows that I've got two names that I'm known by, so clearly there's no fraud involved in that. And it also seems like she's trying to read her interpretation of what residence is. And I'll also, point out that no person, according to Section 2598H, shall be deemed to be a resident who claims residence in any other state.
of? Anything else?
So I claim residence elsewhere, not New Hampshire.
Do you have any other witnesses or evidence to present today?
I would ask if the testimony here is admissible in any other form. That's the only-
What's that?
I would ask if the testimony offered here is admissible in other forms. I know the Department of Employment Security is statutorily excluded from admissibility. I would like to establish that.
Is the testimony here admissible in any other forums?
I guess all I can say is the audio recording that I am making of the hearing today is available to the state and to you. And if the state chose to obtain the audio recording and made a transcript of it and wanted to use it against you in another proceeding, they could use it for whatever the rules of evidence would allow.
So just so it's clear, I've objected to the jurisdiction of this hearing in the first place, and I object to the idea of the state. I certainly don't consent to it. I've not harmed anyone. No one has alleged that I've harmed anyone. And so I hope you'll make the right decision and not put me under a constant threat of arrest for simply going from point A to point B on the roads.
And would the state like to summarize?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Bernard has drawn, here's
Freeman.
Mr. Freeman has drawn attention to the statutes in question here, defining residence at RSA 259:8 and Article 21:6. He's read the statutes into the record. He has not claimed what specific state he says he's a
Objection,
resident of.
statute doesn't say I have to make that claim.
And
She's just making an argument.
he's asking you to apply an exception to the statute in a way that would lead to an absurd result. It would not allow law enforcement to actually enforce statutes that are on the books in New Hampshire, specifically the one that I drew in his examiner attention to bring forth a certain day, which is RSA 263:35. Where he has clearly established a residency in New Hampshire. He was a non-resident. He's a driver of a motor vehicle. He holds a valid driver's license in Florida. And he has certainly established a bona fide residency in the state well
Objection,
before
can you
60
define bona
days-
fide?
She's making an argument.
Well before 60 days before the motor vehicle stop in February. And there's evidence that he established residency as early as 2006 when he purchased a home. He's continued to vote on a regular basis, only in Keene. He's admitted that himself. He's run for several city positions, including mayor. He's tried to become a school board member. Very recently, in this year, which would have carried a 3-year term, he's demonstrated, I'll draw your attention to RSA 21:46, he's demonstrated by all of his actions current intent to designate New Hampshire as his place of abode, his principal place of physical presence for the indefinite future, to the exclusion of all others. The fact that he may have, he no longer may be on the deed, the home that he purchased in 2006 is irrelevant. That happened after February. He still certainly lives in Keene. The evidence shows that. And he has an ungrounded claim of residence in another state. Again, he hasn't even testified that he lives in a specific state. He's just read the statute defining residency. He cannot rely on that as a bald-faced claim. And again, if he's asking you to apply that, which would lead to an absurd result. He hasn't been a resident in Florida for a number of years. And he, again, hasn't claimed residency in any other specific state. He showed a pattern of disrespect for the laws in New Hampshire, and the state is asking that you take a look at all the evidence that was submitted here today. He certainly has shown a misuse and abuse of his driving privileges here in New Hampshire, and the state would urge you to consider a license suspension based on that. Thank you.
I think the last word from
To call your own statutes absurd, I mean, that's certainly a valid opinion, Ms. Killam. but the statutes are pretty clear here in New Hampshire. I'm under no obligation to clarify anything about what states I claim residence in. It says it's for any purpose, and so that purpose is mine and mine to know. If you don't like the statutes, you can work to change them, I guess. Thanks for listening. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm obligated under our rules to do a written determination within 30 business days. I usually don't take that long, but that is the length of time that it could take for me to get this decision in. And I will send it to you at the address that you mentioned in the record, and I will send a copy to the state as well when it's available. Would either side prefer to receive that written decision by email, or does U.S. mail prefer this?
I prefer it in form, and I don't actually have a business card. You can give me the write
I'm
it.
wondering if I have your email.
I'll take email as well. Can you send both though, just in case?
Sure. And I think I have your email. Let me double check.
I heard that.
Ian at freetalklive.com. Okay. All right, thank you. There being nothing further today, we are concluded on the record.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
15 minutes of battery left.
Dude, this room will kill your phone's battery.
She doesn't like the rules. Work to change them.
That's what they always tell us, right? That's what they always tell us.
Yeah.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.